I'm here this afternoon with Jean Coday. She's the director of the Laura Ingalls Wilder Home and Museum Association in Mansfield, Missouri, and she's going to talk to us a little bit about Rocky Ridge Farm and Wilder's literary legacy there. I also want to thank Jean before we get started for letting us film so many segments for the class at Rocky Ridge Farm. It's been a real joy. Thank you, Jean.
You're entirely welcome, and I hope the students enjoy it. I think they'll become lovers of the Ingalls legacy and our Rocky Ridge Farm. And we want you to come sometime and see it.
My first question for you is, I'm sure that several students may have already visited Rocky Ridge Farm, but there are probably several who haven't. So what will students and visitors find when they approach Rocky Ridge Farm in Mansfield?
Well, as you drive out of town, it sits on a small knoll, and you can see it for about a half a mile. And my first impression of it was, oh, that reminds me of my grandmother's home. And when we pulled in and I got out and looked at the house itself, I just felt at home. I felt like it was welcoming. And it was something that was unpretentious yet beautiful. And it reflected her personality, which as the years have gone by and I've learned more about her, her personality was wonderful. And she was a classy lady.
How would you describe Laura Ingalls Wilder based on what you've discovered about her at Rocky Ridge Farm?
Well, I think she was a very intelligent person and always felt that she didn't have enough education to be doing the things she was doing, because she talked about her books as being my little books, sort of a way of saying that maybe they might not be that important. But yet I think before she passed away she knew that they were important. And I asked my husband, who grew up in that town, about Mrs. Wilder. And of course, if you live there, you don't call her Laura, you call her Mrs. Wilder, because he knew her as a little lady that came to town every Wednesday with her hat and gloves and visited her friends and did her grocery shopping and then went back home. And he said she was sweet, she was not terribly outgoing, but she was friendly. And she always wanted to look nice and make a nice appearance and was just a part of the community.
Well, I know you married into the kind of Coday legacy in Mansfield, but could you tell our students a bit more about how you got involved with the Laura Ingalls Wilder Home and Museum Association? And you've been there a long time, and I think you've seen a lot of interesting things and new developments there. So tell me about how you got involved.
Well, when we first came back to Mansfield, we had been living in Ponca City, Oklahoma. My husband had graduated from the Wharton School and had a wonderful job with an oil company. And to say that I was happy to come back to Mansfield would be maybe stretching the point. But somehow it seemed like home to me after a little while. And I had read the books as a child and loved them. And when I first learned about the home, and at that time they had the historic home and 2.5 acres, and that was all. The Lichties, who were in charge of the home at that time, asked us if we would serve on the board, both of us. And I was thrilled. I had a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old little boy, and those were the people I talked to. So I was happy to go to and learn more about the place and how it was, how the association was formed and what they'd been doing. And it's been an absolute pleasure well, it was 1960, so that's been a year or two.
How have things changed at Rocky Ridge Farm while you've been part of that board? There have been a lot of major changes, so you might tell our students about how the property has changed, the collection has grown, and a little bit about what they'll find there in addition to the farmhouse.
Okay. Well, when Mrs. Wilder passed away, she left everything to her daughter, and her daughter, Rose Wilder Lane, who's a famous author in her own right, said that she just wanted a few things, and there were some personal items that she gave to a good friend of hers. But otherwise, everything she owned was left in that house. And it was, along with the people who bought memberships and Rose Wilder Lane's help, we bought the historic home and 2.5 acres. Now, originally was a 40-acre farm when they first started. But the association was formed, and they had officers, and they took care of the business. In the beginning, Mrs. Lichty would come out and bring her lunch with her and sit in the living room and wait for people to come by, and people did come by, lots of people.
Well, I visited there in '65, and I kind of think she was my tour guide.
I think she was the only one for quite a while. She had a great love for this place, and it wouldn't be there if it weren't for her, I'm quite sure. But she had a little gift shop in there that helped pay some of the expenses, and it was in what is the bedrooms now. And then after a while, they bought some property across the street, moved the gift shop over there, and a little lady from a teacher from Iowa came down and would spend summers and help her out there. So there were 2 on the staff. But it gradually got to be more and more, and we then built a small museum. It's very not modern and doesn't do many of the things that a museum should do. But we moved all of the things like Pa's fiddle and her original manuscripts, and we keep those other places in the wintertime, but they're around there in the summer. And this museum was built, and then we started taking people through the museum and the home. And a house was built for the Lichtys by Rose. And that was there, and when it was no longer used, that's where we now have offices and a gift shop. And we, in 1992, bought our first 50 acres and the rock house. And we have gradually been able to buy back about 180 of they had extended their farm to 200 acres. So we have quite a farm there, and it's quite a job to take care of.
Well, I know that there are big changes ahead for the home and museum, and that you're in the middle of a fundraising project. I'd like our students to know what you envision for the future at Rocky Ridge Farm.
Well, we feel that we are obligated to take care of the treasures that were hers. And we've done the best we can, but it's just very hard to do if you don't have the right atmosphere. So we're in the process of raising money for an archival library and a new museum building, and they will be together. We want the archival library to be perfect for the care of we have 6 of her original manuscripts, and we have Pa's fiddle, and we have clothing, and we have everything that needs to be taken care of. We've all had them all treated, and we've done real well in our small museum. But we need a state-of-the-art museum to take care of what she left. We call them Laura's treasures. And we're hoping that we about have enough money raised, but we're interested in anybody who would like to help make a place for Laura's treasures to help us out.
And in addition to the museum, you're also trying to restore the farm. Could you talk a little bit about that? There's a new chicken coop, for example.
Yeah, yes, it's a chicken house. And a young man that has Baker Creek seed is very interested and has always been a wonderful help to us. And he had an Amish crew come and build this little chicken house. And it's just too cute. We have 7 chickens and 1 rooster, and it's just about the right size. And we get some eggs every day. It has a fenced-in yard where they can come out and things can't bother them. And at night they go in and there's a place for them to roost, and then there's the little boxes where they lay the eggs. But it looks like chicken houses looked in the 20s and 30s. And I would know something about the 30s, not the 20s. But the same gentleman plants a garden for us each year. And he has a heritage seed, so they are plants and things in the garden that would have been like when Laura was there.
Let's talk about the orchard.
Okay.
And I know you've just planted it, but tell our students the story about the orchard.
Okay. When they got to Mansfield and picked out this 40 acres, it had a log cabin with a fireplace and doors, but no windows. It was very primitive. And the man had purchased 1,000 apple trees, and they were just the seedlings, and they had been placed in water in a little ditch. You know, they were ditched, but they hadn't been planted yet. So they planted all of those trees at the edge of the 40 acres and did well with them. And it's not easy to start an apple tree. And there were other fruit trees too. But they had all of that, and when the place sold next door, most of the apple trees were bulldozed for the man to build the house. But we had a few, and we took slips from those and planted them, and also have purchased some and had some given to us. And we now have about 20 apple trees that are taking the place of the big orchard. But we planted them exactly like she had planted theirs, 8 or 10 feet apart, and very, you know, like it looks beautiful. Hers look beautiful. Ours we're trying to make look beautiful. I think we'll probably end up with 26 or 8 trees, and we'll put them in the right order and take very good care of them.
Jean, why do you think the Laura Ingalls Wilder Home and Museum is such an important part of Laura Ingalls Wilder's literary legacy? Could you talk about that a bit?
Yes, I think the Rocky Ridge and where she lived is a reflection of her personality. And I think she was a person who was very bright, gifted, and really gifted in being able to make things come alive for others. And lots of people want to do research about her abilities and her descriptive abilities, which are wonderfully important. But I personally think that the greatest gift she gave us was to write about the history of our country. She was a very patriotic person, with the kind who always put her hand over her heart. And as a child, the 4th of July was a big feature to them. She was just a good person, and she knew that she had lived history. And she wanted to tell about the westward movement and being a pioneer girl. And she was a pioneer girl, and students today can learn more about what it felt like to be a pioneer person from her books than almost any that I've read, and on a much higher level. Dr. Meyer, who used to be president of this university, came down and spoke at our dedication of our little museum long ago. And he said that he thought every history student should read these books, and they would learn something about their country that they might not find any other way.
And of course, Dr. Meyer was a history professor before he was president of this university.
That's right.
I think a lot of people are kind of perplexed when they come to Rocky Ridge because Wilder didn't write about Missouri. For our students in Ozark Studies, could you talk about how you think Wilder felt about the Ozarks and why this is an important place for her?
Well, you know, I guess she was always a pioneer prairie girl. But when they came to Mansfield, they had had lots of things happen that were unhappy. And when they came there and they found this little 40 acres on a ridge, and they named it Rocky Ridge for a good reason, and it had lots of timber on it and one little log cabin, she fell in love with that piece of land. And later in her life, when she had built the nice home there, and her daughter had built an even more modern one for them, and they were coming to the end of their productive days, and they were not going to be working on the farm anymore. Her daughter tried to convince her that they would be better off to live closer to her. She said, "Oh no," she says, "this is my home. This is home. I love the Ozarks, and I love Rocky Ridge Farm."
Thank you, Jean. I just wanted all of you students to know, too, that Rocky Ridge is just one of many historical sites related to Laura Ingalls Wilder and her writing career. There are other sites in Kansas, Minnesota, Wisconsin, and of course South Dakota. And I encourage you all to research those sites independently. And if you haven't visited them already, maybe you will someday in the future. Thanks again, Jean.
You're welcome.